I love when my art supplies come with free snacks. I'm Jane Sawyer, and this is Jane Sawyer Makes 3 chip can projects that are actually good. If you're an artsy person, there's no doubt that you've held this cardboard cylinder and pondered, what can I make with this? And perhaps after contemplating this age-old question, you may have turned to your favorite search engine to find some inspiration. And after searching through Pinterest boards and blog articles, perhaps you found, like I did, that many lists out there that purport to answer the question, what can I make with a chip can, are actually answering a different question, what can I put in a chip can? But you and I need more than that. Your idea of a good craft involves more than just covering this can with some dollar store shelf paper to make what is now a pencil holder, but ultimately future garbage. So I want to share some chip can art ideas that are for you, a grown-up, statistically speaking, based on my channel analytics, who wants to make art and craft projects out of easy to find materials that don't suck. Oh, and hey, I want to say welcome to all my new friends. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. The influx of new subs inspired me to hang up some curtains here to cover my junk. What do you think? Did you like seeing all my craft hoard, or do you think this looks better? Let me know. Our first project is going to be these little Pringles chip can cakes. Fake food art is super trendy right now. You'll see fake food projects by popular creator Karin Joy, and I love the little mini fake cakes by artist Julie Nguyen of @FakeCakery. We're gonna do our own little DIY version with a chip can. First, let's mark our chip can for cutting. Set up a stack of books or something to the height you want your line. Place a marker on top and hold it down against the book. While keeping the can flat on the table, I rotate the can against the marker. I actually found that my first line was a little too high, so I opened my sketchbook and flipped over some pages to lower the pen and give it another go. This little trick works for marking a level cut line on almost anything. After carefully cutting along the line, I repeat this process 2 more times because I want to make 2 more cakes. I'm cutting some circles out of sturdy cardboard for the tops and bottoms of the cake and hot glue these onto my chip can slices. Household spackle makes for some great non-tasty frosting. Where you live, this might be called drywall mud or joint compound or maybe wall patch. Mine happens to be pink when it's wet, but it dries white. Now listen, I'm no cake decorator here, but I really like how you can see the strokes of the palette knife in the frosting. I like that it's giving very amateur cake decorator. I think that adds to the kitsch of it all. We're gonna frost the sides and tops of all 3 cakes and set them aside to dry. Here they are all dry, and I'm going to paint these with a couple coats of pastel colored acrylic paint before moving on. For the next step, you'll need a little cake decorator tip and a disposable piping bag. These are really cheap. You can get them at the dollar or discount store or Bulk Barn if you're Canadian. And we're basically going to set this up as if we were really decorating a cake. But instead, we're going to fill that piping bag with that thick and not delicious spackle. Try to get the spackle as deep down into the bag as you can and work out any air bubbles. Again, I'm not a cake decorator, but off camera I did a bit of practice by piping some spackle onto the plastic placemat I work on. This little bit of practice helped a lot. My cake is sitting on a bit of wax paper here. That's important for later. I did little blobby rosettes around the base of my cake. This was actually so freaking fun. Then I did the same thing around the top. It's really easy to just scrape off the spackle if you make any mistakes. I did a big swirly in the middle and added a fake cherry on top. Keep in mind this spackle is going to be white when it dries. For the green cake, I did some rosette thingies in the middle, then added some fake chocolate shavings that I made out of polymer clay. For the final cake, switching to that oh so satisfying close-up, I went around the edges with rosettes again, did a big swirly in the middle, then put some sprinkles on top. These are actually plastic and they came in a slime making kit that my daughter had. When the spackle is dry, I gently peel away the wax paper to free my little cake. I'm going to mount my cakes on this frame here to make some wall art. I've just put some black poster board in the frame and I'm going to use these inexpensive hook and loop fasteners to stick the cakes to the glass. And there you have our chip can cake wall art. How cute is this? I also thought these cakes would be fun as a little secret storage container. If you want to see how I made one into a secret compartment cake that makes use of the chip can's original lid, I have shared that as an exclusive bonus scene on Patreon. When I saw this party-sized chip can at the store, I immediately thought it would be the perfect proportions to make a mini version of this spooky tree. People ask me about it all the time, and maybe one day I'll show you how to make a big one. But for now, let's make a chip can version that's a heck of a lot easier to store. Let's make this tree trunk a little more dynamic and spooky looking by crunching some curves into our chip can. You might have to wrestle with it a bit to crunch in the sides. After all, you don't want this to look like a straight up bent chip can in the end, so work on bending that cardboard until it looks nice and stands up by itself. In real life, if you have a rotted out tree that's broken off, it will have a jagged edge and dip down in the middle. We're going to duplicate that look on our sculpture by cutting the top of our chip can off at an angle. I cut a little dart in the top too. This is totally optional. So now would be the point in your project where you should add some weight into your chip can. Don't forget, like I did, in having to rip up your work later. I'm just using some gravel from my driveway. You could use sand, clean kitty litter, that jar of old nails from your grandpa's garage, whatever you've got. For the next step, I've cut a bunch of corrugated cardboard strips. I'm using a couple as ribs to close up the top of the can and covering those with masking tape. I cut a branch shape out of cardboard and hot glued it to the side of the can. I'm adding some texture by scrunching the strips of cardboard. I cut these to length and then hot glued them onto the branch. In real life, this was the point that I realized my sculpture was annoyingly tippy, so I needed to add some weight to the bottom. I ripped open the top of the can again and then stuffed in some rocks. I then added on the other branch and created some more texture with cardboard. Next, I covered the whole thing in a layer of paper mache. I go over my recommended paper mache method in this video. I'll link it in the description. I'm going to make some eyes and teeth out of air dry clay. I'm kind of guesstimating the size of my tree's mouth and sketching it out on my work surface so I know roughly how many teeth to make. I used DOS brand clay. It's really affordable and very versatile. I thought it would be cool if the teeth looked like split and splintered wood, so I used my knife to create some textured lines. I also created a pair of eyeballs and pressed them against the table to flatten the backs. After the paper mache and the clay were good and dry, I hot glued the teeth and eyeballs onto the tree. I made my tree bark out of fabric. This is cotton flannel plaid, the traditional fabric of the Canadian people. You can tell it's cotton because it holds a flame, smells like burnt paper, and doesn't shrink or melt in the heat. You're going to want a natural fiber for this process. Any thin cloth will work. Process the fabric into strips and squares and remove any loose threads. We'll start with the tree's top lip. Soak a strip of fabric in watered down white glue. Fold up one raw edge a few times to flesh out the lip. Arrange the folded edge over the teeth and blend the raw edges onto the sculpture. Do the bottom lip in the same way. The eyelids are a small square of fabric folded into a triangle. I do the bottom eyelids first. And then I add the top eyelids on top. The nose is just a folded up wad of gluey fabric that looks vaguely nose-like, and I just stick that under the eyes. I then continue to cover the sculpture in gluey fabric, adding wrinkles and textures for a ripply tree bark effect. This method of cloth mache was popularized by artist Dan Reeder. I'll leave a link to his website and some of his books in the description in case you want to learn more about it from the man himself. When the fabric is dry, I prime the whole thing in a DIY matte black primer. We're going to use a dry brushed paint technique to paint this guy. I have a video that goes into depth on the dry brush paint technique, and you'll find the recipe for my DIY primer base coat there. I'll leave a link to that in the description. After dry brushing, he was looking a bit monotone, so I mixed up a bit of wash in green and purple and used these to add some dimension to the piece. I always like to paint the eyes last. This is when the sculpture finally comes to life. And there you have it, a spooky tree sculpture made out of a party-sized chip can. I think you could really go ham with more details and embellishments if you wanted. I think a crow or a cat sitting on his branches would be awesome. Maybe yours is growing some shelf mushrooms or is covered in cobwebs. You could really continue to decorate yours in any way you'd like. Our final project is going to be this sweet little bird automaton. If you didn't know, automata are non-electric, kinetic works of art that make use of simple mechanics to move. A lot of folk art, whirly gigs and such would fall into this category. These projects are super popular with woodworkers, and we're going to use a lot of craft wood for this project. You don't need a saw, but you do need a drill, either a power drill or one of those pin vise hand drill thingies you can get on Amazon. They're super affordable. I'll leave a link to one in the description. All right, let's make a little birdie. We're going to use this bit of chip can I had left over from my cakes. We need some rigid tubing. I'm stealing that from this shampoo pump. We also need a craft wood dowel that fits snugly inside the tubing, but also can still spin freely. Finding a good tubing and dowel combo is probably the biggest challenge of this project. Now we're going to punch holes in either side of the can. I used the full throat depth of my hole punch so that the holes would be level. I also eyeballed the position to get them in line. I had to widen the holes a bit so the tubing could fit in, but the hole punch definitely helped me line them up. I line up the edge of the tubing with one side of the can, then I hot glue the tubing to both sides of the can from the inside. When the hot glue has cooled, I can trim off any extra tubing. I don't need to work inside the can anymore, so I can glue on a cardboard top. At this point, I like to do a quick check to make sure my dowel can still move freely in the tubing. You don't want it getting hung up on any glue bumps or anything. I roughen up the surface of the can with some sandpaper, then hit it with a couple coats of gesso. I'm painting mine to look like a birch tree. I added a bunch of cornstarch to my paint to give it some texture. When that was dry, I wet blended some birch bark colors on there. If you don't want to do this, a solid color of paint or even a nice bit of paper wrapped around the can would look great too. With the paint dry, we're going to make our little crank. This little craftwood stick is a bit too long, so I'm holding it over the tubing hole and marking it just slightly above the base of the can. I could just cut the end off straight, but I think it looks a bit nicer with the corners rounded. A coarse nail file makes quick work of that. I grab a wooden bead to thread on the end of my dowel. This is optional, but it gives a bit more surface area for the glue to stick. I'm using cyanoacrylate glue and activating it with a bit of baking soda. What people never show you in these videos is that you have to hold the piece in place for a minute until the glue grabs. In real life, it's not like an instant thing. You're gonna have to wait a minute for each join to set. A bit more dowel makes the handle for the crank. If you want to be really fancy, you can slide a big bead onto the handle and secure it with a toothpick. It'll still work if you don't do this bit though. I've cut and rounded the end of another bit of craft stick here. Through the magic of film editing, a toothpick-sized hole appears in the end. I'm going to glue the toothpick in there and then cut off the excess. I'll glue two little wooden beads on there with about a 1mm gap in between them. I cut off the extra toothpick. Now we're back to our chip can. Threading a bead onto the other end of the axle and trimming off the excess. With my crank handle pointing down, I glue on this little piece pointing up. Trust me, this motion will look a little more impressive with a bird attached to it. We're breaking out the air dry clay again and sculpting a simple bird. The bird needs a hole through his lower belly. His wire feet are eventually going to go in there. I used some floral wire to make this little loop. I trimmed it to size and inserted it into his little tail. You could always just make a small hole through his tail if you don't want to fuss with making a wire loop. Now here he is all dried. The bird is going to teeter-totter on his feet, which are made out of a bit of galvanized wire. I just get this from the local hardware store. Bend a scrap of wire into an L and feed it through the hole in the bird's belly. Bend down the second leg. Now, remembering that bird's knees bend backwards, create the rest of this little birdie legs. Make his feet pretty big. These are going to be hot glued down onto the top of our chip can. Your feet should look like this. Now we can paint him up. I've got some green craft felt here. I think I'm going to go with this one. We'll cut out a circle that fits onto our chip can. I thread the little bird feet into the felt so I can glue these down directly onto the chip can lid. We'll stick those down, then attach the rest of the felt to the chip can. To animate our little bird, I'm using this bit of black wire. Floral wire would work here too, or even a little twist tie. We're going to loop that around the 1mm gap we left between those little wooden beads earlier. Thread the other end through the loop or the hole in your bird's tail. Leave this a bit long until you're sure the bird's movement works right. Now our little robin can hunt for worms in the grass. This step is totally optional, but I have a stash of green faux fur and it makes really cute little tufts of grass, so I'm going to add a few of those onto the green felt. We'll hot glue those in place, then trim the grass a bit. And here's our little bird automaton. It's such a sweet little bit of folk art, and I don't think most people would guess that this started out as a chip can. And there you have it, 3 chip can projects that are actually good. In brainstorming for this video, I actually thought up a few other ideas that I think are pretty cool, so stay tuned for part 2. I hope this inspires you to grab a chip can and make one of these projects yourself. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments. I respond to almost every comment I get here on my channel, and I'm happy to help out my viewers whenever I can. If you don't have anything to say, comment a cake, a bird, or a tree emoji to let me know which project was your favorite. Give me a like if you think I did a good job. Likes make me feel like I'm walking on sunshine, and they also allow more people to find this video. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more affordable and accessible art info. I post here as often as I can. You'll find more info and free templates for other trash-inspired projects over at janesawyermakes.com. Check it out, follow me on the socials, go eat some chips, and I'll see you on the next one.